Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wired for Wonder. My name is Lori Kirkland with deephumanx, and I am excited today to continue our conversation about how do we use the change that AI is bringing to accelerate making the workplace better, to serve humanity better, and make it better for the people working for it, working in it. I am excited today to have Henry Gordon Smith from Agritecture with me today. Welcome to the show, Henry.
Thanks, Lori. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you have kind of an interesting background. You have taken very traditional work of agriculture and tied it with tech. Do you want to just give the audience a brief history of who you are, or just a quick snapshot of yourself?
Yeah, first of all, so the philosophy that I have and our company Agritecture has is really that in order to adapt to climate change, agriculture across the globe will need more technology to intervene, to gather data, and to optimize production. And, this really began for me as a college student when I first became aware of the climate crisis, and I was interested in dedicating my career to something that would be impactful in it. And I saw business as a means to do that. I didn't know which part of business, which gap in the market I could fill that would be both impactful and profitable. And Agritecture was the name of a blog I started in college in 2010, 2011. And this blog was about covering how technologies were allowing us to grow food in cities, in vertical farms, on rooftop greenhouses, and how other technologies were related to this sort of new version, new future for agriculture that was more technified. And I tracked that essentially. I tracked the news on it. I visited farms. I went to the events, and I built a global audience around this topic. And in 2014, they started requesting consulting services from me. And it was sort of like that light bulb moment where the gap in the market was clear for me, where there was no one providing a global outlook, or at least a globally available outlook for how these technologies would play out in various markets, and the business policy investment considerations related to that. And so, to put it briefly, since 2014, Agritecture as a consulting organization has advised on 350 consultations in 45 countries. So quite a
Wow.
global, a uniquely global, set of portfolio pieces. And we're also diverse in the sense that we have worked with governments on policy planning for new food systems, urban food systems. We've worked with technology companies to consider how do they get in on the AgTech, climate smart ag space. We've advised entrepreneurs, many entrepreneurs, on planning their first farm that utilize these technologies. So feasibility studies, market studies, this is the kind of services we provide, but we've maintained the DNA of the blog throughout this. So we still have this global digital community. And I've been traveling the world and doing this work really since 2014.
Okay, so as you were talking, like I can literally feel some of the passion that you have about this, which is what I love. Because as in the world of AI, it is not anymore about what you know or what you've done or how um like how professional you can be. It's really about who has the creative, who has the ideas, and we're seeing time and time again that it's really the people with a big purpose that
Uh-huh.
are going to be making some big waves here in the next few years. At deephumanx, we think that every person has their own X factor. That's why we call it deephumanx. We all are motivated by our own purpose, our own drive. What is that passion or drive that, for you personally, what's your X factor?
I think that there's so many different places I could have gone in my career. I sound American, but it's important to understand that I grew up internationally. My mother is from the Czech Republic, and my father is from Great Britain, and they met in London. My parents have an incredible story of traveling the world. My dad was an engineer. They lived in Brazil. They moved to Hong Kong at one point, and that's where I was born. And I
Mm.
grew up in Southeast Asia, Hong Kong and Tokyo until I was 10, then moved to Germany and Czech Republic and Russia and lived in those countries from 10 until 18. And then I went to Canada to study, and the journey of this sort of blog and company began. But I think like that part of it is just part of my the influence, I would say, of the global part of our work, right? So it's a passion for global solutions. I would say that's part of who I am and how I grew up, and what my parents' values have been passed on to me is one piece of it. but it's also there's also an urban and technology and engineering aspect to this because my dad, he was very he was a talented civil engineer, and I got inspired by a lot of just the experiences we had looking at his construction projects as a child and learning about these things. And I was always interested in how you could maximize space, to be honest. Like, it sounds funny, but as a kid, I always was interested in how you could do more with less in like a city context. And I love to design things. I love to draw and design buildings and cities. So there are certain like signals to what career I might end up in as a child, and just the things that were around me. And when I was able to connect that to the climate crisis, which I identified as the most critical thing I could dedicate my life to, is how I felt about it, is how I feel about it. I felt there were two options. I could go towards more of a mitigation of climate change approach, where I engage and invest my time in mitigation activities, or I could focus more on adaptation, adapting to the reality that the climate will change, cities will change, supply chains will be weakened, workplace will change, all these things. And so the focus on adaptation made more sense for me because I grew up in so many countries and I'm so used to being thrown into new situations. And like you, we both have a sort of knack for consulting because we like those challenges and we like learning and we're curious. So that makes us good consultants, or at least ready for the work and enjoying the work of consulting. So I think those are some of the influences, right? If you can sort of see a sort of mosaic of experiences that's led me to here. And that's why the passion for this subject of adapting to climate change by farms that can handle more heat and use less water, use less arable land, use less labor with the fluctuations of the workforce, all these things, even beyond climate change, that make agriculture so much more volatile than before. Stabilizing that and preparing for a future where there's more volatility is my passion. And you can sort of see how a history of my parents and my upbringing and what I experienced and the realizations I had as a young adult led me to this. And I've just sort of stuck to it. And I think we're talking about things that can benefit the audience here. Finding your passion and sticking to it is really a privilege in life, and a big moment for anyone. And I think that it's not that common, but I'm happy to say that I really like what I do and the challenges that I have to continue to tackle in my work.
I love that story, and thank you for sharing actually that background. You really got me with the adaptation part of it. Part of Wired for Wonder is that, look, we're neuroscience based. We use neuroscience based frameworks. We're very much into how we help people, right, become purpose driven through AI augmentation. But so much of that lies on shifting your point of view or your mindset to realize that, look, you only have so many hours in a day. If you can dedicate that towards something that is valuable to you, and you can actually go through your own personal adaptation, then all of a sudden it's like work becomes fun, life becomes fun. You start getting these rewards that, like you said, you didn't know how it was going to end up, but it's really here. And what's interesting is like people are really, we're wired for adaptation. We
Yes,
are
we are.
adaptive species out there, but we kind of have this society right now that is very full of judgment. I mean, that's where all this divide is coming from. But like we have this ability to say, hey, you know what? We're going to put down, I like how you said that, we're going to put down the resistance or mitigation, and we're actually going to look towards how do we build something that's an alternative, right? And that is an interesting mindset that I don't think everybody gets. When I say that to you, what do you think are some things that you've done personally to remind yourself to stay in that adaptation mode, the agile mode?
I mean, in the context of this topic, right, climate change itself, I mean, I have a very specific exploration of the topic and research of it, as I studied academically and explored a career in it. And I felt like because of the policy, I studied political science for my undergraduate degree. Because of the policy experience I had and education, I was pretty pessimistic that we're going to get together as a global society and hold hands and prevent climate change. So to me, I felt like I was looking at the human experience that I had and what I'd seen around me in work. As humans, we tend to not change until things get so bad that it damages us. So if we instead reframe it and embrace the fact that change is inevitable and difficulty is inevitable, how can I make myself more resilient and adaptable to that inevitable volatility? I can focus on the present as opposed to this like possible future that is out of reach. I don't want to get too philosophical, but that's really how
Please,
I feel. That's
no,
really how
you
I feel, you
so
know?
way philosophical because I
Yeah.
feel like we need to have this conversation
Yeah. I
and
mean,
say,
so that's how I
change.
feel about that, you know? Yeah.
Humanity has been at a place like this before where it makes me sad when I talk to some younger generations who are absolutely sure that the world is on the brink of destruction. And I am lucky because I have, some decades behind me now to say, no, 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 no. Like it's going to all be okay. What feels very real right now, it is changing. So we don't know. So there is scariness to it. But by switching to the mindset of riding the wave of change, you actually can create a whole like new set of possibilities. Whereas if you're just clinging to what was, well, then you have just the landscape of what was. And so I actually love your philosophical lens. And being in technology, like I don't think enough businesses are understanding that, hey, we are building a new world to somewhere and nobody knows the answer where. But the key thing is going to be riding the wave of change, not stopping it from happening because that time has already passed. But how do we continue as humans and as leaders, right, to ride the wave of change that's in
Yeah.
front of us?
I think we're speaking the same language.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to say something controversial, which I just wish that there was more use cases now. And I really understand how AI is for so many years, the question was, can we build this? And now the question for leaders and companies is, what do we want to build? And I'm saddened by the number of use cases that are out there. Like people are thinking very incrementally. And I
Yes.
think about climate change, and I'm like, where's the companies out there that are like, we're going to build a big vacuum? If we can shoot things into space, can we at least pull our, build a big vacuum or something that's kind of outrageous? That's really like, let's actually tackle climate change. What we need are clear ideas and thinking, and the vacuum is just an idea. But I'm kind of
Sure.
like wondering, like, are you seeing that in your space where you're seeing some kind of radical ideations because we actually have this radical technology now?
Yeah, I think you know, let's just like in regards to this vacuum idea, right? That's a mitigation one. Like that's mitigating like what's happening in some sense. It has some adaptation layers, but we're trying to mitigate the CO2 that's going to influence more climate change in that context of a CO2 absorber. And certainly Bill Gates and others are working on that, and that's cool work. For me, when I think about adaptation in our work, we're trying to imagine what will happen. For example, let's just talk about a specific example. In the Czech Republic, hop production is at threat. Climate is changing, there's droughts, and these hops are a key ingredient in beer, which many of us love. And being half Czech, this beer represents a culture, a tradition of thousands of years. It's the original Pilsner beer, okay? So now fast forward to now, the climate is changing and these farmers, these traditional methods, and all this work that they've done, that they've earned, that's been really incredible, that's been right, is now wrong because the climate is changing. They need to adapt their activities, but they don't have any data. There's no technology. So there's so many layers of AI intervening into that now that I get excited about from an adaptation perspective. Number one, at Agritecture, AI allows us to imagine possible futures in a more open, structured way. And so we spend a lot of our time because we're not selling a type of greenhouse or a farm or an irrigation technology. We are trying to find what is the best adaptation strategy forward and technology stack for the problem and the context. That's what we do as a company around the world. So to imagine the scenarios of what will happen if I add irrigation, if I add shading, if I add an AI, like a sensor that's going to tell me this, those that openness, that open-mindedness that as part of my personality and part of Agritecture's methodologies is now empowered by AI, allows us to do structured scenario planning. That's number one. Number two, all the data that is gathered or that we do gather from these farms now or in the future, there really wasn't much being gathered, but we've installed 6 pilot farms in partnership with Microsoft and Acai to basically get data so the farmers can respond to volatility and yields and heat and drought and rainwater, rain conditions. All of this combined gives us a new data set that we can run other possible scenarios on an operational basis, not just about an intervention as the first one, but an operational basis of what happens, when there's less rain. Should we water this field or that field? Thus saving human time, saving resources, and allowing the farm to adapt and maintain profitable margins to supply this product. And we can also think about the future at scale. So we can also take a step back and say, as we gather more data from future farms on the ground, we can actually think about where are there places to plant hops in the future that might be better than they are now to adapt to that future to maintain productivity and quality and farmer viability. Those are just three examples of how AI sort of can intervene, and there's many more. And the thing that people need to understand is that agriculture is the least digital sector. So if you think there's digital gaps in HR, in finance, in sports, in whatever, in retail, it's way, way more bigger in agriculture. And the ability to reach farmers and to let them engage in digital literacy is even wider. So
Yeah.
there's a long journey that's still needed for ag tech to have its moment, but it's such a big opportunity and so important to human survival. Enormous potential. Yeah.
I think like you just highlighted stuff like so many people think that, oh, I can't have these big grand ideas because in business it's all about making money.
Yeah.
What's really needed now, especially going into the future, is great ideas like you were talking about, right?
A vision. I like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I love being in nature, and I think it's just
natural. That AI vision of a future where it's like enabling us to be our best selves is the utopia I think that I can align with that you're saying.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that is what would you tell the audience are two or three things, two or three human skills that you think people should really be leaning into right now in this time of change in order to make sure that they, stay adaptive? What would you recommend?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I mean, I think in no particular order, the ones that come to mind for me are, um, you know, general emotional intelligence is the most important. We need to be able to learn to observe, communicate, adapt how we communicate with fellow human beings. And that is a practice that's ongoing through our lives that I think is not going to change at all with, I mean, artificial intelligence could help maybe give us feedback. There's other things like that that could exist, but that is our work to do as humans to become increasingly emotional intelligent. I think another one is, it might sound silly to people because languages are becoming so easy to translate and all this, but I really mean learning other languages. For me, I speak Czech, German, English, Spanish, some French, some Italian, some Russian because of how I've grown up around the world. And it's been advantageous to me, even in a world that's dominated by English or technology and translation tools, to at least break the ice and find this human connection that feels authentic. When someone makes an effort to learn English and speaks to me, I recognize that effort and I feel like there's a common ground that's being built, a bridge between the two beings. And we have that because we're both speaking native English speakers, right? So I think that is another thing to invest in. The other thing is, in an increasingly digital world, like you need to learn still how to be a good presenter and communicator in a public forum. I think maybe there's, AI has a lot of potential to help you. For me, I use it a lot for speeding up my the content I create, my newsletters, what news topics I should look at, the content I'm getting and structuring it. What I'm trying to say is like you can leverage it for personal branding, and personal branding, I think, and having a voice and learning to speak publicly and communicate your ideas concisely, which maybe I'm not doing the best at right now, but I'm pretty good at it. I've practiced. That's a skill to get and to tend to invest in. Those would be the three human skills I think are really valuable. No matter.
I really appreciate your time
Thanks for
today.
having me. It was, yeah.
Yeah, if the audience wanted to connect with you or find you, where should they go?
I am so easy to find, but on LinkedIn is probably the best place. I've got a weekly newsletter called the Agritecture Chronicles where I feature farming challenges around the world and how technology is responding to it. And I'm very easy to reach on LinkedIn if you want to connect with me about anything related to what I do in the future of agriculture.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening and thanks for joining us today, Henry.
Thanks, Lori.